back to room 237, and we finally did it. um, 5 months ago, at the end of June, I set out for a marathon of Italian horror and Giallo films. And even though I still have, I think, 2 Italian films left, this is the last Giallo of that marathon. So after this, I will not be doing another Giallo, at least until after Christmas, because I did ask for some for Christmas. And it's not like I'll never come back to Giallo. It's just I may start collecting again at some point for another marathon. But I think I may have gone a little overboard on this, because prior to this past June, I only had 16 Giallo reviews. This is my 96th, so I've reviewed 80 Giallo movies in the last 5 months. But Giallo will still be a huge part of this channel. I don't know if the next marathon will be that big, but probably won't be doing another one at least till after Christmas. And unfortunately, it's not a big special one or anything, but it is a very, very early one. And it's 1965's The Embalmer, or probably more commonly known as The Monster of Venice, which I would say that both titles make sense. I would say The Monster of Venice sounds better, sounds more like an Italian Giallo film. This cover, even though this all does appear in the film, if I handed it to you, Giallo might not be your first thought. But this image does appear. Now, it was directed by Dino Tavella, and it stars, well, he's credited as Gin Mart, which I think was a pseudonym he used a number of times on different films. But I want to get his real name. Luigi something, I believe his name was. Luigi Martocci. Yeah, he goes by Gin Mart. Also Maureen Brown, Luciano Gasper, and Anita Todesco. Now, Gin Mart playing Andrea and Maureen Brown playing Maureen are really the only actors to roles that I can give, because almost every cast list I come across doesn't say who plays who, so that's a little frustrating. But I have read some reviews, and a lot of people are calling this a crappy movie, and 2, a poor Giallo effort. What I'm willing to bet they don't understand is 1965 is only the 3rd year Giallo was a thing. I mean, 1963, Girl Who Knew Too Much came out. That was the first Giallo. So even though the first 2 main pioneering films, Mario Bava, Girl Who Knew Too Much, and Blood and Black Lace, were already out, it was still very, very much in its infancy. So the fact it lacks a lot of tropes, I think, is totally fine. It's understandable. I'm willing to bet they don't understand that. Also, I'm seeing that people are calling it a Krimi hybrid, even though I can see why, which a Krimi is like the German equivalent to a Giallo. It has its own tropes and everything, and it's based more around the works of Edgar Wallace. I wouldn't say this is a hybrid. I would say this is very much an Italian Giallo. Just happens to have more tropes, or more, be maybe a little styled more like a German Krimi film, but it's an Italian film, not an Italian-German co-production, so I wouldn't really call it a hybrid. Just shows how loosely some people just throw around genre terms. But, and This movie does suffer from a lot, I will say that. I mean, it's only 79 minutes, which is not long at all, but this movie has a lot of padding, which makes it feel long. It has a very high body count, but unfortunately we don't really see a lot of the deaths. It's implied all the victims drown, but then again, it's 1965, a very, very low budget. We're probably not going to get a whole lot of underwater shots. I mean, it's not Creature from the Black Lagoon. I guess just to get the story out of the way, someone has some scuba gear and abducts women off the sides or off the boats of the Venice Canal, takes them down into this entrance of this underwater monastery, and embalms them to preserve their beauty forever. And now some people have complained about the monologues that the killer has while he's embalming the women, about how death, death cannot take her, you'll be preserved forever, saying it kills some of the suspense and impact. I didn't really have a problem with it. Also, some people are saying, why is he saying it out loud? There's no one around. If you listen, it kind of almost has like an echoey type sound to it. I think it's an inner monologue. Doesn't help he's back too, so we can't see him anyway. But I think it's an inner monologue. And yeah, he preserves them and then sets them up in these displays. And I think there's 9 deaths in the whole movie. So I think there's like 6 or 7 that are preserved like this. And then there's the death at the club. And then the killer himself at the end, which isn't a spoiler, that always happens. But to combat that, you have this young ladies' man journalist named Andrea, played by Jen Mart, who decides to take on the case. At the same time, there's a trip of high school girls chaperoned by Maureen, played by Maureen Brown. He offers to be their tour guide. They start falling for each other. And he's the one that's kind of piecing together the case. That's pretty much the movie. At first they think, oh, just a couple women have fallen into the canal and drowned. But he's the first one to realize, hey, they're all around the same age, and we haven't found any bodies. I think there's some sort of killer, and the killer is dubbed the Monster of Venice. And I will say it does have a good atmosphere to it. It doesn't have the visual style that Bava had already kind of established, even for a Gothic film, because this is more of a Gothic aesthetic, even though it takes place in contemporary times, takes place in the mid-60s. But the visual style, it still feels like a 40s or 50s kind of B-movie. But there's a lot of shadows, kind of low budget filmmaking. So it still has, kind of mood to it. Probably one of the better aspects. The music does sound more like sort of classic horror movie music. It doesn't really sound like Giallo, sort of inventive, almost ironic kind of music. Like when something spooky happens, there's like the orchestral music, or like when there's walking around, it's just pleasant everyday music. There is one piece that it was in my head because it sounded like it was on a loop. I can't even remember the melody to it now. but especially like down in the monastery or down in like just like the tunnels, just with the shadows and the way it's lit, you know, it creates a good gothic atmosphere that I really liked. There's not a lot of inventive camera work. It's not a very visual film outside of the atmosphere. Although there is one where a character stumbles across another entrance into those tunnels, and the camera's like right up against her at an upward angle as she's carrying this candlestick. And I mean, it's all black around her, only lit by the candle. I liked that. And yeah, there are parts where the killer looks really goofy, because when he's not in his scuba gear, he is wearing the robe and a skull mask. It's not this mask. It's a closed mouth, plain white skull mask. It does get kind of silly looking at the end, but when he's actually in his underground lair and it's all, you know, gothic-y looking around him, then it looks fine. But eventually there's a chase where he's outside in modern day Venice, and yeah, there's a part where he's running away from Andrea, and you know, seeing a guy run around like this, black monk hood and robe with the skull mask, it does look silly. And yeah, there's a lot of padding, like with him being the tour guide to the high school class, or with them going to this ballroom and like her cousin and aunt are dancing together, and then there's like this Elvis type impersonator. Also, just the acting and dubbing is kind of what you would expect. It's sort of low budget 60s acting. It's nothing special. In fact, some of Maureen's lines, especially towards the end, like, there's a girl missing. We have a girl missing. Have you found a girl? Her name is Grace. Has anyone seen Grace? Where's Grace? Do you know where Grace is? Like, no pauses. And and although some of the more Giallo type moments would be how it sets up the possibilities of who it could be. Like, her cousin is an architect. It does set up that the hotel manager is a bit of a creep. Like, some of the girls, like their windows, their mirrors are two-way mirrors, and it shows him watching them. So it does have, you know, enough Giallo elements. It's not as good looking of a gothic horror film like, say, Black Sunday or Black Sabbath or anything by Bava. But, and yeah, the acting and dialogue is hokey. The effects, there really aren't any effects. And also, to make it feel more like a old classic-y kind of monster horror movie, is his lair does have like the mad scientist type setup. Other than that, there's really not much to talk about, really, unfortunately, so it's not really much of a Giallo review. But I guess I'll get into spoilers. I was hoping this would be a shorter video, but I mean, can I recommend it? If you have to see every Giallo, honestly, you can do a lot worse. I've seen way worse than this, but if you want to see one this early in the genre, you can do much better with, like, The Possessed, or even Girl Who Knew Too Much, and Blood and Black Lace. And there's not really a special release for this. I mean, this is just alpha video. It has been on a lot of, like, 50, 100 multi-packs, but yeah, unfortunately, I don't really know anything else to say about it. There wasn't, uh, yeah, it's been compared to many films, or like the style, like the 50s, less like a Bava film. Uh, there, it does have some comic relief with a street sweeper and I think he's like a luggage handler. He has like a rickshaw for luggage. Um, but yeah, so there's really not much else to say. I didn't mind the film. I would say it had enough mood and atmosphere when it had to. And yeah, I didn't mind it. So, last Giallo of this marathon, but I'm going to get into spoilers, so. Most unfortunate thing about this movie is that the most interesting aspects would be the last 20 minutes or so, and that's when Maureen catches on that the hotel manager is a creep. I think she turns out her light and her mirror lights up and sees someone cleaning it on the other side, and she goes to complain, but the desk clerk says that the hotel manager's not in. So she goes to his office or his house. I don't even remember exactly. But yeah, she doesn't go to the police. And she's just sitting in either his office in the hotel or like his office at his house. And she's just touching everything on shelves and tables and the fireplace. Then the back of the fireplace opens up. And that's this other entrance, which if he had that, why doesn't he just do that instead of jumping into the canal like he has a couple times? And then when she sees that, she doesn't go to the cops. She goes down into it to investigate. Which, there was a scene earlier in the film where Andrea gets in a fight with the killer. And he doesn't call for help. And even during the final chase, he doesn't call for help. He just chases him and fights him. But yeah, she gets down to his lair. Oh, and actually, before that, yeah, all the girls and Andrea are together on two separate boats. And the killer comes up, tips the boat over and grabs one. And then takes her. And that's sort of Maureen's experience with it. But yeah, so then catch up. She ends up in the lair, sees the killer, and there's kind of a chase with her. And at one point, the killer hides among all these corpses. And okay, that's a cool, suspenseful part. There's another part with all these corpses that have robes, and that's when we see this one. It's more of like a background, almost like a decoration, but it's on the cover. Meanwhile, Andrea gets called over by the sweeper and baggage handler. They say they found something in the water. It's the belt that belongs to the girl that got taken from the boat the night before. So he gets a scuba suit, goes down, he finds the entrance. He sees the killer, and they get in a fight. Yeah, I was expecting that to happen. The killer picks up a wrench, throws the wrench at him, misses and hits the wall, which causes it to burst and water to rush in, which was foreshadowed because during one of his embalming sessions it showed like a little trickle coming through the wall. So then Andrea chases him. long chase scene. They end up in the city. Well, he runs through the hotel. Again, guy, black monk robe and hood, skull mask, running through this fancy hotel. Then outside, which he's outside, Andrea's still back down there with water rushing on him. Then all of a sudden, the killer's outside. He turns around. Andrea's right behind him. And he's running kind of foolishly. But he catches up to him. They get into a fight. And he finally, he's holding him off by the throat. And the killer's gone like full psycho. He's just kind of hissing and yelling. Like, because his whole thing has been shattered and stopped. It never goes into why he's doing it. Just he wants to preserve the beauty of the most beautiful women he's come across, but doesn't say why. And so yeah, just as it looks like Andrea is about to die, we hear a gunshot. He goes down, camera zooms in on top of his head. And then the main inspector, who didn't really believe Andrea throughout most of the film. Andrea asks if he's dead. He says yes, we shot him. Then he asks if he killed Maureen. And I don't remember, actually, if he killed Maureen or if she died in like the flooding. I think it was the flooding, but either way, she still died. And he just talks about how could we ever have this in a city like this, and then the camera just zooms in on his skull mask, then goes back to the church statues with the angel and the hammer hitting the bell, and it ends. So it's definitely not, I wouldn't say it's a great entry. It is an early one. It's acceptable as to how imperfect it is, but I can definitely see how, it's an early version of what would come later. And actually, it does feel kind of more, story-wise, it is kind of more like the post-Argento formula than the Bava formula, because, just like with the red herrings, and it's not particularly about someone super wealthy and the misdeeds that they're doing. But so yeah, obviously it's not like a Sergio Martino film. It's not a prime example of the genre, but it's a very, very early entry in just like the foundation lay work of the genre, and I accept it for that. I mean, it's fun. I like some B movies from like the 40s and 50s, and it has the gothic mood and atmosphere, especially when it really needs to. And so like when you have the killer in those settings, like the monastery and the tunnels, it looks good. And it helps also evoke like the classic monster type films, or also like the mad scientist kind of setup in his lair. It's kind of, I see it more of a hybrid as like classic fantasy horror and the then modern murder mystery. And I'll totally accept that. So yeah, this is my 96th Giallo review and the last one of this marathon. Done 80 since June, so 5 months. Holy crap. So yeah, it's early December now. Have a few weeks till Christmas, but I'm hoping to get some more for Christmas. But yeah, it's been a crazy journey. So let me know in the comments what you thought about this Giallo marathon. Did it go on too long? Did I do too many? What do you hope to see after Christmas? Would you want to see another Giallo marathon? I've already bought most of the easy to get ones, so the next one might not be as lengthy, but anyway, I've got 2 Italian films left. These 2. And then if I get to it before Christmas, just the one tribute homage Giallo, Belgium French film, Strange Color, Your Body's Tears. But for now, yeah, I'll just have this, my 96th Giallo review. So go enjoy that playlist, and thank you for watching.